Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Europe-MENA regional discussion on humanitarian crisis and employability, which is a part of the Youth Global Disability Summit. The Youth GDS is co-hosted by the International Disability Alliance, Atlas Alliance, through Youth Mental Health Norway, UNICEF, and supported by the government of Norway. I am now going to briefly explain some of the features of today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded. There is international sign interpretation, language interpretation in English, French, and Arabic, and captions in English. You will find a CC button on your screen to enable the captions. If you need the captions in a different window, the link is in the chat box. Kindly take a few seconds to enable the language of your choice in the language options again at the bottom of your screen. There will be an option to mute original audio. Please do not select this option. If you do, you might miss some parts of the audio. So let's all take 10 seconds so you can select the language of your choice in the language option. If you have any question for panelists, kindly use the Q&A option or leave your question in the chat box. Our team is monitoring both and will try to respond to questions in the course of the event where possible. We hope to have time for questions wherein participants may be invited to ask questions. Please note, we cannot put camera on for participants due to the limitation of the platform. Where time is an issue, priority will be given to live answering questions that are relevant to the discussions which have been presented. Should you have any accessibility issues, please send a private message to the host account or email webinars@ida/secretariat.org. And the team will try and resolve that to their best of their ability. We request all speakers to kindly keep to times and to ensure that they speak slow enough for the interpreters and captioners to follow. We would like to thank the logistic and communication teams at the International Disability Alliance for their hard work and consideration in enabling the participation of all of us here today. Thank you. Gula, I will leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Ahmed, you can actually start the moderation. Thank you. Okay. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you, dear Golar. Thank you. Hello, all participants. I'm Ahmed Al-Barakat from Iraq. I'm a pharmacist, 29 years old. Now we start our session about humanitarian crisis. من الآن راح أحاول أحكي عربي لأنه أغلب المتحدثين هم عربي.
From now on, I will switch to Arabic because most of the speakers speak Arabic, as you know. This session is very important because we know that we're all prone to accidents, and you know that we can find ourselves in cases of emergency. We have to face sometimes natural disasters, or we can face illnesses or the pandemic like the one that we have been facing today. We are faced with a great challenge, of course. How can we, as people with disability, have our own fingerprint in such circumstances and leave our own impact on the society and contribute to finding solutions to such global crises? We know that these challenges have been occurring in several countries and several parts of the world. Of course, this will give us a greater impetus in order to look for better solutions.
MENA or Europe group.
As the MENA and Europe group, we are very happy that we were able to find the proper speakers who will be able to communicate the idea in the best possible fashion, so that we raise the level of awareness about this topic and we convey this message to the world, saying that no matter what the circumstances are, people with disability have the right to access education, to have the possibility to express their capabilities and abilities in order to uh, live their lives in the best possible way and to live up to the level of their own ambitions. As a matter of fact, when choosing the speakers, we did confront a lot of challenges, but on the other hand, we tried to convey a clear message through our speakers, namely the fact that we have a lot of youth who have great abilities and who have success stories in confronting these challenges. And we expect them to have even greater contributions later on. At first, I will show a quick video.
10 أيام الشخص اسمه نزار نزار من العراق
Covering the story of Nazar from Iraq, an ICT man who's 36. And I will let you watch this 2-minute video that will highlight some of the challenges that he faced and how he was able to achieve a lot of important things in his life. So if the video is ready, please go ahead and start it.
My name is Nazar Barges Malko. I was born in 1990 in Sinjar district, Ninawa province, Iraq. I am married and I have a 6-month-old daughter. I graduated from the Administrative Technical Institute, Department of Tourism and Hotel Management. On August 14, 2014, after ISIS attack on my city Sinjar by 11 days, I had been hit by one of their cars. It was so severe that I lost the ability to walk. At that time, there were no clear roads between Sinjar and Mosul and Dakuk, which greatly limited accessibility to medical services. The issue affected my psyche because in this situation I knew the extent of suffering of people with disabilities, and I realized that there is no rules in emergency situations for persons with disability. Therefore, I couldn't find any solutions for my difficult situation back then. The border separating Sinjar district and the city of Kamishli was loose and unprotected. However, there were ISIS patrols from one distance to another. For this reason, transportation to and from Syria was very dangerous and life-threatening. But it was my best available option. I took the risk and traveled to Kamishli, where my left limb was amputated below the knee in Kamishli Hospital, and I stayed there for 5 days, from which I was able to reach Kurdistan region in Iraq. In the following days, I recovered gradually and got a prosthetic limb at the International Red Cross Center in Erbil Governorate. On September 17, 2018, me and my friends, who are also people with disabilities, founded an organization called Sinjar that targets people with disabilities, and we work to demand and defend their rights in the Sinjar District Center. I want all governments in the world and the international organizations concerned about persons with disability to support us in humanitarian emergency situations and focus on Article 11 in the Convention Rights for Persons with Disability. Thank you. With kind regards.
ثانك يو نزار. نزار حاليا شاب عنده منظمة.
So as you've seen, Nazar is a young man who founded an organization with some of his friends in order to help people with disability who have been suffering a lot during this phase. Now, we have a speaker from another country, Ahmad Riyadi. Ahmad is from Sudan.
هو law student at University of Khartoum and member of Blindness Association of University of Khartoum. أحمد شاب طموح. بصراحة حاول.
Ahmed is a very ambitious man and who tried to convey a clear idea, which is the fact that it is true that we face a lot of challenges, especially in countries that are torn by conflicts, which applies to Sudan, of course. So he would like to express himself about the challenges that he faced in such circumstances and how did he cope with the situation, with these challenges, and still work on achieving his dreams as a young man in Sudan, and how can young people with disability shoulder their responsibilities and help people with disability as well, as stated in Article 11 of the Convention on People with Disabilities. So I will give the floor to my great friend now, Ahmed Radi. Ahmed, turn on your microphone, please.
مرحبا بك يا أستاذ أحمد وسعيد إنه الليلة أكون جزء في
Good day, Ahmed. I'm very happy to take part in the Global Disability Summit. And I would like to talk about people with disability in areas of conflict. Of course, it's very difficult to summarize everything in a short period of time when talking about people with disability living in a region like the MENA region, where there are a lot of humanitarian crises, be it wars or other types of disasters, notwithstanding the dire economic conditions in many of our countries, which were exacerbated as a result of the corona pandemic. Of course, people with disability face a lot of challenges in cases of emergencies, either natural or human-made emergencies. And these difficulties vary by region, of course, but there are general features that apply to all of us, especially when we see how the local governments react and deal with these problems. I would like to talk specifically about a number of challenges, namely related to needs that emerge in cases of emergencies. Of course, we know that people have general needs, but there are also specific needs for people with disability, and these become more urgent in cases of emergencies. We need to make sure that these needs are met, be it the general needs or the specific needs in cases of emergencies. And these need to be met in the case of all factions of the society, and specifically in the case of people with disability. We know that at times of war, there are often displacement camps, and there are often centers offering humanitarian assistance. And in all of these services, it's important to account for the needs of people with disability, people who have accessibility problems, of course, and make sure that they have equal access to all of the services that are being offered. We can think of awareness campaigns that are organized, for example, during the corona pandemic or any other emergency. All of these services need to be conceived and designed in a way that are accessible to people with disability as well. So all services need to be provided to people with disability in a way that is accessible to them. So these services need to be adapted. There are also additional services that are specific, of course, to people with disability.
برضه المفروض تكون متاحة يعني الليلة بنتكلم عن حرب فبتكون التحصل عليه
For instance,
الإعاقة فيه نوع من الصعوبة الكراسي المتحركة
we know that people with disability have greater difficulty in accessing some of their own specific needs. For example, in having access to wheelchairs or other specialized equipment that becomes rather rare and scarce in times of emergencies.
ذوي إعاقة محتاج إعاقة حركية محتاج لموية كثيرة المفروض تتوفر لهم موية كثيرة فالنقطة
And
زي دي
this applies to
كمعالج
all types of
للناس ذوي
disabilities.
الإعاقة
This is what I wanted to reiterate. People with disability in
احتياجات
times of a
خاصة
crisis have the general needs that everyone has, but they also have their own specific needs that need to be met. And all of these needs to be met in a adapted
في
manner.
تحدي ثاني متعلق بانه الاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه هم نفسهم ما مضافين او ما
Another
مضمنين
challenge is the
في
fact that people with disability themselves are
الدوله
not
في
included in
في
the governmental plans that are established in times of crises. So people with disability need to be consulted in any step or any plan that is devised by the state in a case of emergency
فيجب انه يتم
so
المشاركه
that their
في
needs would be
اعاده
properly
تنفيذ
integrated.
الخطه
And they
التوجيهيه
need to be
كيف
integrated
حيتعامل مع الكارثه دي
in
سواء
all
في
stages,
التنفيذ على
be
اساس
it in the
انه
stage of planning or implementation later on, to ensure that there is the proper adaptation process in place, and also in the later stage of monitoring and
فحقيقه يعني
evaluation.
في السودان في جائحه كورونا قريبه في قبلها كانت في حروب في دارفور
For example, we know that in Sudan, we have also gone through the corona pandemic. We have had repetitive wars in the southern parts of Sudan and the area of Darfur. And in all of these circumstances, people with disability were not consulted and they were not integrated in any process. So they were basically marginalized, which is absolutely unacceptable. According to the latest statistics in Sudan, people with disability represent 4.8 to 5% of the local population, which is a considerable percentage, and which means that people with disability deserve to be consulted in order to make sure that their needs are properly met. There is, on the other hand, another challenge facing people with disability in times of crises. And it is the fact that there isn't real integration for people with disability. We know that the cases of emergencies are the exception. And in natural times, we need not to forget our duty towards people with disability in making sure that they have the proper enabling environment and in integrating them properly in the society. The problem of integration is exacerbated in times of crises, especially when we talk about education, and people with disability need to have the right to education. But the problem of integration becomes even worse in times of crises. As a result, as there is a greater need for integration in times of crises, it has to be an issue of priority. One last thing that I would like to raise at times of crises is that people with disability face greater economic and financial difficulties. For example, during the lockdown, we know that people have financially suffered, especially certain categories like women, for example. But other marginalized groups include people with disability who are more prone to losing their jobs in times of crises or lockdown. As a result, we need to establish full-fledged plans in order to make sure that people with disability are protected against these financial difficulties at times of crises. So generally, there are a lot of challenges, as I've said, related to the proper accountability that governments adopt in dealing with people with disability, and there needs to be greater attention given to specific needs of people with disability and to make sure that they are properly integrated at the level of planning, implementation, or evaluation, and the right to integration needs to be protected because in times of emergencies or crises, we need to double the efforts and to understand that people with disability would face greater financial difficulties in times of crises. So we need to work proactively against all these possibilities. Thank you, Ahmed, for raising all of these important points and for summarizing the different challenges that people with disability would face. I have just one question. In your opinion, what's the challenge that we are most prone to face in times of emergencies in the future? What would be the biggest challenge as you foresee it? I think that it would be the impossibility for people with disability to meet their direct basic needs, the daily needs of people with disability. If they're not met, it would be impossible for these people to go on with their lives. For example, if they don't have access to, for example, a wheelchair or basic food or basic needs, it would be very threatening.
تتعاظم اشكال القسوه الانسانيه دي لان انا اكون عندي احتياجات ما قادر احصل عليها وهي احتياجات
As a result, they need to be properly included in the society, and their needs need to be properly met. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed, for these beautiful words. Now we're going to move on to the second speaker. Asma, are you ready?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Hello, Asma.
Hi.
Hi. You can start your speech about the humanitarian crisis.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Ahmed. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Just yesterday, we had a pretty strong earthquake, actually, in Georgia. And this once again reminded me and made me think of the fact that I do not know where are, for example, the disaster shelters, where are the bunkers in our city and in our country around me in case of either natural disaster or a conflict or like a military attack to save ourselves, let's say. And I'm sure many other people also are not aware of this. And that is a huge issue, especially because our area is earthquake prone. And also due to the improper building of high rises and bad quality construction, we are at a higher risk, even if the earthquake is not of such a great degree. I was just turning 14 when the Georgian-Russian war, full-scale war, broke out in August of 2008. It was August, so the school still has not started, but it was about to start. And those days I was really thinking, where could I take refuge, me and my family, in case if we get overrun by the Russians. And then I was thinking of Ukraine as of a safe haven. And now we see that the similar kind of invasion is probably about to happen there as well, unfortunately. That year, we almost, my school, specialized school for the blind, almost actually got into academic leave for a whole year because the internally displaced persons were living there who had to leave their homes. And because my school, as it is a specialized school, it's more equipped to live there. There are bathrooms, there are showers, there is stove, there was a kitchen. So these people were living there and it got harder to relocate them. I remember I was collecting books to homeschool myself that year, but fortunately our parents managed to convince the Ministry of Education to relocate and find the alternative place for the internally displaced persons to live. And we were able to start the school. But that year was really a turning point in my life, where I decided that I was interested in getting into international processes beyond disability issues. And then it finally happened that in 2019, I was selected as Georgia's UN Youth Delegate, and I was able to speak at the UN 74th General Assembly. And of course, the people with disabilities have to be involved in both disaster risk reduction, preparedness and strategies, and peace building processes, because we usually are more affected than average population by both armed conflicts and natural disasters. In 2017, I was actually able and was given the opportunity to look through Georgia's disaster risk reduction strategy and action plan. But the strategy was started from 2014 to 2020. So it has been 3 years into the strategy before I was able to actually go through it and write feedback. And even that was only because the German organization Arbeiter Samariter Bund, the ASB, was involved, and they had a project on disaster risk reduction and disability inclusion in that. And that year we were invited to go to the global platform on disaster risk reduction conducted by the UN at Cancun, Mexico. However, since then, the Georgian authorities unfortunately still have not taken up the responsibility to proactively involve persons with disabilities, including youth, in disaster risk reduction strategies, preparedness, and all of these processes. The strategy of 2014-2020 obviously is outdated and had to be renovated. However, we have not been involved in the renovation process anymore, which I think is very, very important. I would stop here and I'm ready for any questions.
Great speech. Thank you so much, Asma. I have a question. Asma, how we can the humanitarian crisis solution be strengthened and applies more effectively?
Well, the CRPD convention actually speaks about it in Article 11, that people with disabilities have to be involved in disaster risk preparedness, and not only their interests have to be met, but I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that the Article 11 of UNCRPD explicitly says that people with disabilities have to be proactively involved in the decision making related to disaster risk reduction and humanitarian crisis issues. But unfortunately, when the Security Council issued its resolution on people with disabilities, it was not similar to the ones that they have on women, peace and security, or youth, peace and security, where they speak about involvement of women and young people in peace and security related issues. But it is rather about meeting best interests of persons with disabilities, which sort of excludes, us from active participation and excludes us as subjects, but views us more as a mere object. So my idea and my opinion is that it's important that the UN Security Council brings its resolution into line with the UNCRPD and into the line with its own other resolutions on women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security, and makes a similar one on persons with disabilities, peace and security. Thank you.
A great speech, Asma. now we هسه راح ننتقل إلى متحدثة صغيرة
And
بالعمر.
now we're going to move on to the next speaker who's quite young. Saja from Iraq, a very brave young lady from Iraq. Saja, if you can hear me, the floor is yours. Go ahead, please. So, as I've said before, Saja is a member of the Alliance for People with Disability, a local organization in Iraq. She's a young activist. If you can hear me, Saja, please go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Good day, everyone. My name is Saja Qadimi, a high school student and an activist in the Iraqi Alliance for People with Disability. I'm 15. My brother died as a result of the armed conflict in 2003, and in 2006, my mother was also attacked in aerial bombardment. As a result, I was born with disability and in a family of people with disability. So this case of emergency has affected my life as a person with disability, but there are also other cases of emergencies that affect our lives, like the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected people with disability and people without disability. And I have personally contracted the virus, and I have suffered a lot, especially in terms of accessibility. Whenever I would need to get tested, I would have people carry me up to the second floor of the hospital in order to be able to access the proper laboratory. And of course, we had to accommodate ourselves inside our household to protect the other members of the family. And of course, as a person who suffers as well from disability, being affected by the virus has also compromised my health condition. So it's really important to anticipate the needs of people with disability in cases of emergency. I really remember how difficult it was for me even to get tested and to get the PCR test, and I would need to be carried up by people to the second floor. Perhaps we can think of sending out teams of medical helpers who would go to the households of people with disability to get them tested there. And that way they would offer them better protection. Because other people with disability would also have other types of needs. So we can organize such mobile clinics in order to visit people with disability at home and get them tested and give them the proper treatment and care. And this means that we also need to offer them other types of services in order to protect them in such cases of increased emergency. Thank you, Saja, for this nice intervention. Of course, we've all had to go through this, and we know that in some countries, accessibility to testing kits was very much compromised, even more for people with disability, as people with disability would often need to be escorted, even for such simple tasks. I have a question, Saja. As a young girl in Iraq, do you have any kind of message that you would like to address to governments or to international organizations that are working on the situation of people with disabilities? So what kind of message would you like to convey? Something that you would like the whole world to hear. As youth with disability, we have the right to live a dignified life. And I would like to recall the importance of the CRPD. that talks specifically in Article 17 on the right to personal protection, and Article 4 that talks about general commitments. So we need to protect people with disability against all types of dangers and risks in cases of emergencies, because children with disability have also their own dreams and have their own ambitions that they would like to achieve during their lives, and they need to be uh, provided with the proper tools to do so. And I am fully confident that as eloquent as you are, this message will be heard everywhere, and your message will be impactful. I really thank you, Sasha, for having taken part in this session. Thank you, Sasha. Now we're going to move on to the next speaker, a young activist who has led a great struggle, especially that it has been quite challenging for us to get to a person with disability who lives in a refugee camp. So we're going to listen to the story of Ma'moon, a man with disability who suffers from blindness from Syria. And he's married. He has a child. So Ma'moon, can you tell us more about your story? Thank you, Ahmed. Good day, everyone. And thank you, Sasha, for the great message. And thank you, all speakers, for the valuable information that you've shared with us and all people with disability who would watch this session. My name is Ma'moon from Syria. I'm 28, married. I have one child. And my family lives still in Syria, but I currently live in Germany. I started suffering from a disability in 2009 in Syria. I suddenly felt that whenever I would shut my eyes, I wouldn't be able to see in my blind eye. I consulted a lot of doctors, and in 2009 and 2010, and it took me about a year before I was able to get the proper financial needs in order to be operated, especially that eye surgery was very expensive in Syria. Unfortunately, right after the surgery, I found that it was a failure, and I really did not gain anything from the surgery. Then the war started in Syria, and I had to move on with my life, coexisting with my disability. Thankfully, my family was offering me great support. By the end of 2021, I decided to leave Syria in order to seek better treatment opportunities and to find work because our living conditions in Syria were very dire. I decided to travel to Libya, and so I did. Of course, I went there to get work and better treatment opportunities, but there in Libya, the security situation was also getting worse. So I decided to embark on a new adventure, which is to travel to Europe, specifically to Italy at first. So I started seeking this opportunity, but I would be often met with rejection. People would tell me, you will not be able to do it. It will be too cumbersome. You can't see, you have a disability. But thankfully, I met some people who were very helpful and who helped me leave Libya on the 22nd of November last year. And I was able to reach Italy through the sea after a 15-hour long journey. We were out of fuel and we contacted humanitarian organizations and thankfully they came and helped us and we were able to reach Italy 16 hours later. And now I've been living in Germany for the past 2 months in a refugee camp, and I was checked by a physician, and I was surprised to see how much my condition had deteriorated. it wasn't even necessary for the physician to check my right eye because I wouldn't be able to see anything in it. But even in my left eye, I found that I was suffering from vision deterioration, whereas I wasn't even noticing this deterioration as a result of all the other challenges that I had to juggle with. And today I do face a lot of difficulties. For example, even during daytime, I have great difficulties seeing with my functioning eye. But I still have great hope that here in Germany, once my papers are ready and I have the needed documentation, I would have better um, medical services because we know that EU countries offer better protection for people with disability and better services. Of course, in my day-to-day life, I do face a lot of difficulties, but I hope that things will get better very soon. I'm not losing hope. I really feel that I can overcome this challenge.
إن شاء الله أكيد عاشت إيدك
Of course, hopefully, we all hope that, and
يعني إنه شخص
we understand that you've been dealing with a lot of difficulties. It's not easy for someone to cross the sea and
خطر ببالي سؤال
to spend 15 or 16 hours on a ship.
موجود
But I would like to ask you the following question. As a person with disability, you're currently living in a refugee camp. In your opinion, what's your most dire need now as someone with disability living in a camp?
تعتقد بهيك وضع تحتاج أنت شخص
And
مساعد
do you think that in such a
لظروف الإعاقات تعتقد
condition,
في وضع صعب
regardless of your disability, do you think that people with disability in refugee camps, for example, would need to have an assistant with them in order to complete their paper formalities and documentation process? Of course, for example, now I do face a lot of difficulty in going to a physician. For example, I would need an assistant. I would need, for example, an interpreter to interpret what I'm saying to German. And even if I want to look for an address, I wouldn't be able to see it. I need someone to assist me. And for people with disability similar to mine, and I'm considered as someone who's moderately disabled.
فما بالك انت بالليل وبالعتمه مثلا
أمم.
هي
But
يعني
during nighttime, I don't see anything actually.
انه يكون في اهتمام اكثر بالنسبه للاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه وما يتعاملوا باي
And another important element is to make sure that people with disability are not discriminated against, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have our own difficulties, and we all seek a better life and to contribute to the local community, and we'll do our best to do so.
شكرا مامون
Great. Thank you very much, Mamoon.
شكرا
I wish you
شكرا
great success. Thank you very much for this contribution.
بهذا السيشن
So, as you've heard, we have
جدا عظيمه
just listened to a number of speakers who have shared with us their own success stories and their own valuable experiences.
ممكنه بصراحه هذا السيشن
We try to cover a wide array of people with disability, and I'm sure that you have all felt how we as people with disability have been keen on overcoming any challenges that life throws at us. We've listened to the first story of a young man from Sinjar who did not suffer from disability, but as a result of the ISIS attack, he became disabled, and in spite of the great challenges, he was able to leave the country, go to Syria, and then went back to Kurdistan. And then we listened to Ahmed, who gave us a great summary about the challenges that people with disability would face, especially at times of armed conflicts or during emergencies, during global pandemic, for example, or when faced with a sudden natural disaster. So we thank Ahmed for this summary. Then Asma related her own story and the story of her own struggle. Thank you so much, Asma, for that. So Asma expressed herself very eloquently, and she told us how at any moment we are all subject to an emergency or a disaster, and we would suddenly find ourselves facing great challenges. Then Saja from Iraq took the floor, a young woman, a young girl with great ambitions and great goals. She said that she was also affected by the pandemic, especially that she already had her own health problems, and with that, she faced a lot of accessibility problems. Still, she kept her resolve, and she decided to pull through. Then we listened to the story of Ma'moon, a story of great struggle and success. We really congratulate you for what you've achieved as someone who was able to overcome a great difficulty. You're also a father to a young child, which makes it even more difficult for someone in your condition to overcome all of these difficulties. But you have went on a journey of displacement for more than 5 months, leaving Syria to Libya, and then um, crossing the sea in a 15-hour long journey in order to get to Italy from Libya. And then after Italy, you moved to a refugee camp in Germany. So these were really valuable experiences that you've shared with us. I really thank you for these contributions. And as a moderator, I'm very honored to have moderated this discussion with people who have great levels of ambition and great successes. The topic selection and the speaker selection has been excellent. I would like to commend the effort made by the organizers, especially that it wasn't easy to do that. We tried to cover as many aspects of this topic as possible. And I hope that we will all have the needed willpower to overcome any future challenge. Before we go on to the next break, I will leave you with this message. As Ahmad, a pharmacist from Iraq, I would like to tell you that I will always keep a smile on my face regardless of injury or my pain, because there will always be a light after darkness. Thank you. Now it's time to go on to our break.